Okay, we still have a few folks coming in that had registered. We'll let them come in, but I'd like to go ahead and get started and basically do the introductions and go through a few topics before we get in the core of the training for today. So this series that I started several months ago really began with a few conversations, order management in Oasis, basically all the processes that happen to all orders after you send the order off to the factory. I know some groups don't do these processes, but the main thing is they are there in Oasis ready to go, and the value you get out of those, essentially you already have this capability, is something you need to be aware of. At least that was the feeling that I got from a few of our customers when we were talking to them. Let's go through the details. April 4th, we did commissioned orders, just basically how to manage commissioned orders and how that works. Then we did resale orders. That included import orders and various details you have to do if you're doing anything resale, really. Today is shipping. We'll go through all the shipping processes surrounding an order, most of them anyway. And then next month, we'll finish off with basically reporting and some of the other more advanced concepts that I was unable to cover during these 1-hour sessions. Okay. If you do have questions, by the way, type those into chat. I have a gentleman here, Hayden, that will holler at me as they start coming in and kind of break, make sure that I see them, because sometimes I don't see them. So Hayden, make sure you read them to me as well.
All right.
And other than that, this is kind of an open session. I'm going to go through my outline I'll get to here in a little bit, but that is fair. If we don't get to all the questions, by the way, Hayden and I will go through those at the end. We will send emails and a link to the video at the end of this session as well. Okay. And by the way, all these other sessions are already on the web. That should be in the newsletter, but if you don't have access to them or anything, just send a note to support and they can get you links to them. All right, details here. A little bit of an advertisement or query that we have going out to everyone that are on these sessions. We've been thinking about replacing, since Light Fair is once a year or once every other year now, basically replacing or adding in an Arkansas training as well. And anyway, if you think this is something you might want to do, send yes or no to support. We're just trying to get a little bit of feedback as we go through the process. It's going to cost us a lot of money, and we don't want to do it if nobody's really interested, is what it boils down to. Okay. All right, major processes to consider. This kind of went through. We've already talked about commissioned orders and all the processes around that, resale orders, shipping, and then the reporting is kind of at the end of it. So we've covered most of that already. In addition to that, I've been going through sales accounts, commissions for account, aging reports. That is actually going to be the last session out there, and maybe a touch on paychecks as well, which is it's another new system. Went through commissioned orders, resale orders, and today is managing shipping within Oasis. So let me get started here. This is a lot of groups that I work with that have been doing shipping for years. They tell me all of what I'm about to tell you. I didn't make any of this up. It is people tell me, here's the reason why this is important. Okay. And the reason why all the you're putting shipping inside of Oasis is important is it's just all the value you get after the fact. In other words, it isn't about the shipping. It's about everything else that comes through tracking the shipping. That's the best way that got explained to me actually by some customers. So I'm just telling you what your peers have been telling me over the years. So the main thing is more comprehensive than a spreadsheet. I've actually had a number of people that come back to me later and said, hey, remember that spreadsheet I used to do? I'm so glad we don't do that anymore, because it is tedious trying to get a spreadsheet to do what we do in Oasis naturally. And once you kind of get into it and understand what's going on, just trying to track shipping in the system, it'll make more sense. Okay. And the value to the customer is huge. The main thing here even begins by simply understanding the fact that an order was put in the system and sent over to the factory. Did they get it? Did they tell you anything about it? And then obviously the schedule that comes out later, and then the shipping is important as well. So it is very important. I'll go through some other nitnacky things that Oasis will do for you. But these two main elements here, just being able to get a process that is easy, reproducible, not by just the spreadsheet guru in the office, but by everybody. And then the value that we give back to the customer just by simply making sure the factory has that order and they're actually working it, and we have a schedule. Okay, adding shipping, the mechanics. I'll go through this one now, and we're going to go through a number of little details here. I'll pull this out of the way, and I'll try to pull it back every once in a while. This will be obviously on the recording as well, so we can kind of go through. It's a nice little real fast little layout that I did a couple of days ago, a little outline. All right, so let's talk through some details here. Let me just start with a real basic order. And by the way, this is Lightfare database that I used a couple of weeks ago. Lightfare is not what it used to be, but there's a lot of good people I've talked to. So thank you for coming by if you did. Let me go through the basics on shipping. So we'll go with this real basic one-liner here. And I like to show the different basic ways of adding shipping, what it means, and just the details here. And while I do this, I'm going to point out a few details in here that I think are important. The first thing, anyone who's getting started in Oasis and tracking shipping, what they usually see is this estimated here. I want you to forget that it exists. Now, as soon as I say that, I do have some customers that use estimated. It has a good meaning. And what it means is it's the agency's estimate as to when this item might ship. Notice I said agency's estimate, not the factory's. Big difference there. The key here is it was a really good idea, something we came up with, I don't know, 15 plus years ago, and it was just an estimated date on it. Most people don't show that in their settings in Oasis to remove it from the reports and everything else, because most people are uncomfortable trying to predict when the factory might do something. So I understand that. And like I said, the groups that buy into this concept, they're all about it. Okay. But anyway, ignore it unless you want more details on that. But it pretty much is just doing a date out here. We can show you how to have the system calculate a date based on the order type and place it over here as just kind of a swag as to when they might ship this thing. Okay, over the years, and I'll come back to this a little later, there's this thing called PAT ACD. We'll probably head this direction because in the background, if you put all the shipping information in Oasis, it'll start calculating the statistics. Basically, it'll start averaging even by catalog number in some cases, when that thing might ship. So in some cases, we can predict better than the factory. It's kind of scary, actually. But that's PAT, which is our, I think it's, used to remember what that called, but PAT is our internal code name, like a lot of the other companies. We go to market with PAT saying it's machine learning or AI or whatever, and it's the calculation on it. So I'll come back to that here in a minute, but let's talk about basic shipping now. If you have one line right here, and I want to identify the fact that the factory has the order in Oasis, I can open up the order, and I'll show you some faster ways to go through this here in a minute, but I'll open up the order and I'll click add shipping, okay? It immediately pops in the quantity of 10 and this ACK, that's what I want you to focus on, ACK, and there'll be schedule and there'll be ship here in a minute or the different codes you'll see over here. But I'm acknowledging all 10 got to the factory. And typically you replace this shipment one. Basically, we put something in here just so you have some sort of traceability for the small factories that really don't have order numbers or whatever. But you can replace this with whatever the factory gives you as far as a order number on their side, a sales order number, if you will. Now, that's all you have to do. As soon as I start doing this, by the way, because I have some of this other information in here, starting to promote that to a scheduled date. So I'll go ahead and put in a date on this as well. So it's scheduled to ship on the 20th, I guess. So as soon as I do that, notice it already started that process. It promoted this to a scheduled date, which is probably where most people are going to start. So key elements here is I can put just a little bit of information in there, identifying the fact that the factory has the order. That's huge. Especially when some of the factories kind of get in trouble and they're falling behind a little bit. You know they got the order. You may still have to follow up with them. That's you all probably know that better than I do. But the key is that starts the process. With the schedule date, now we can start doing some interesting stuff here in a second. All right. So that's where we're at. Now, that schedule, technically we could do save and close at this time. We're done. And then on the 20th, there'll be some processes I'll show you here in a second where the order will pop onto a list and we'll be able to follow up on it and say, hey, did it actually ship or not? Okay, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But let me show you the next step on this, just kind of promoting this schedule to an actual ship date. So if it actually does ship, let's say it's shipped today, it shipped from Cabot, I guess. Carrier code, there is a place to put in carrier codes, and that's a question we get a lot. And the key element here on the carrier codes, that's going to link to a website. I want to put that out there if you haven't seen this before. But this primary reason for Oasis to have this in here isn't to identify the carrier, but to identify the website that we can actually link to from within Oasis to actually go to the carrier's website. And I'll show you a little bit of that here in a second as well. Okay, and then obviously if we ship it, we want to put in the carrier or the tracking number that we can use on that shipping website. Okay. Now, this is one area, and since this is a webinar, this is normally where I'd stop and ask people. So put any question you might have in the chat, and we'll have Hayden help me out here in a second. But I'll point out a couple other small things here that we'll get into. Actually, just one last one is within the setup of Oasis, and I'll show you this here in a second. I'm trying to give you as much as I can on this. We'll go to manufacturers. And I'm going to show you a little bit of the setup items that I've been alluding to also identify this thing called a transit time. So one of the key elements here is if you go to terms and then you go to freight and shipping, there are a few things in here that I've already touched on. And then we're going to go to basically warehouses where they ship out of, just so you can see a little bit more here. But this lead time basically is what it uses to create the estimated date. And again, if you want more information on how that works, we'll carry that through support, but essentially it takes the order type, it adds a few dates to it, and that's what's going to do the estimated thing. Again, if that's the agency or your calculation. Okay. Now, let's go back to the transit time here. I've identified this as shipping out of Cabot, okay, and it can appear in a drop-down list if I've set up all that inside my manufacturer. So if I go to work groups here, you'll notice that it has, I'm sorry, not work groups, warehouses. There's a local warehouse where you can do consignment. That's a different conversation. We'll have another day. But inside the manufacturer's warehouse, there's some information here. It looks like I used a different factor on this one. Sorry. The other one is chain or representative vendor. It's a different brand name. Anyway, in the other one it says Kansas and Cabot for some reason. And this estimated date, estimated lead time, or I'm sorry, ship time, is what we identify by warehouse. And the reason for that is I'm in Cabot, Arkansas. Something shipping from California is going to get here probably about the same amount of time as it would ship out of someplace like Pennsylvania. But if it's coming out of Chicago, it may arrive a few days earlier. So that allows me to identify based on where that warehouse is at. So Cabot, Kansas, or more likely Pennsylvania, California, Chicago, Florida, Georgia. You know where they ship out of most of the time anyway. But the key element is that will automatically pop in this case, a 7 or whatever it is, to identify the average number of days it goes from that location to your area, in this case, Cabot, Arkansas. Okay. So that's the key elements on one shipping line right here. And that identifies it shipped, the factory's order number, the date it shipped, where it shipped from, the carrier, linking to this website thing. I'll show you that here real quick. And then the transit time, basically how long is it going to take going from their, on average, going from their location to ours. Okay. Now, once that's in there, especially with the setup stuff, and I'll show you this here in a minute, this linkage, is I can actually, even within Oasis, by the way, this purple bar over here, some people won't see that. And if I open it up, it exposes some new features, some old features actually, but it identifies shipping information mostly. But there's an entry in here that says tracking website. If I click on that, it'll show me the tracking numbers I put in on the bill of material. There may be one, there may be a dozen. And if I click on it, it'll actually go out to the website. So I don't know if UPS likes me doing this, but anyway, they give me errors all the time because obviously it's made up. But the main thing is that also is available when you print a PDF. If you're using the customer web portal, which is an add-on to Oasis 04, it all links back to the website. And there's other things we have as far as getting information to customers or even your outside salespeople. So lots of scenarios where that's used, but it all begins by identifying the carrier code, the tracking number, and then the setup is, because I just realized I showed you that, is in orders. And I'm sorry, I'm on a Mac today. Some people don't like that, but file, configuration, carriers. That's where I identify the carriers. By the way, this can be actually a carrier product. So it's not uncommon for me to see the different color codes. I think it's like UPS red or something like that. I can't remember all the terms. And then the web link. This is the most important part. And what it does is it actually identifies some code in here. So this is the UPS web app thing that they've had forever in here. And they have a specific way they want you to identify their tracking number. So it says tracking number in this little code stuff here. And don't worry about memorizing this out of this webinar. Ask support and they can help you set these up. They can't, in some cases, they may have some of them, but you almost have to kind of explore this a little bit. But you might ask what they have. The system comes with the UPS one and FedEx one, but we can help you code that is what I'm trying to hint at. And unfortunately, with a lot of smaller carriers, there's not too much we can do there. Okay. Main thing is once it's in there, now it enables all those other elements there. All right. That is the very, very basics of shipping. Now, if you had to do that all day, you probably wouldn't be too happy because some of these orders are large. Some of them have a lot of different scenarios in there. And some of you are lucky enough to have data feeds from your factories where what I'm about to show you comes in automatically. And we'll touch on that a little bit more a little bit later. But regardless, at some point you have to put in data manually. So I want to go through this real basic one line at a time and get a little more interesting on the updates here. So let me start that conversation by actually, before I do that though, I almost forgot. I want to show you a few other scenarios here. I'm going to hold that one for later. Camera on that. Back in mind here. There are other scenarios here I almost forgot about before I jump to the process stuff. What if only half of this ship? Basically, there's only so much available and they're going to have to build more product. You can actually go through this scenario and identify the actual shipment is only for 5 or half of those entries. By the way, if you mess up and type wrong, which I do quite often, it'll turn red because they could well have shipped too many, which is obviously going to be a different issue. But the main thing is it's going to warn you that the quantity does not match the order quantity and let you know. By the way, it's the release quantity, not the quantity. I forgot about that. If you have a whole for release and they ship the whole product, it'll turn red if it's greater than the release count. So something to keep in mind there as well. But if I have a second line, I can actually add a second shipping line to this one order line here. And it'll copy down the sales order number, assume it's going to be the same from the factory, but it may not. It may have changed. And then you can go through the process identifying when that new item is going to ship or the balance is going to ship. So there you have it. I have a actual line and a schedule line. By the way, I'm going to go ahead and show you one of the shipping reports just to kind of blend in some items here. So this is jumping ahead a little bit. We'll go to reports and there is the order status. This is the old print form that we've had in for, I don't know, forever. And I'll just do a print preview real quick of this. Other than this system is, I have to go to PDFs on this system because I broke something. Order status. And here we go. So this is the old site, and this helps me actually because I can click on that and go to the site. Main thing is this is the old form. It looks okay. There's normally a ship to address here, but my database doesn't have very many ship to addresses in it. So main thing is it's a basic form that we have out there, and it's showing me the following. First of all, it's going to show me the fixture type. It's going to show me the order, the quantity. If it's been on hold, it's going to show basically the whole balance here and how many have actually shipped. So that's going to be the sum of what actually shipped so far. The catalog number, more on that in a second, and it has been released. Okay, it's not on hold, which obviously tell us some other issues. Also, if we have lines on here that have been canceled, it'll show the line and say cancel, which is kind of nice as well. So it shows the first shipment, actual quantity 5. Shipped out basically that carrier is where it shipped on and that tracking number. By the way, that does click on it. You can click on it and go out to their website again. When it was released, the current ship date, which is actually an actual ship date. It's not scheduled. It actually is shipped. And we're estimating about 4 days on site. Now, if you turn it, because I have it turned on, the estimated on-site date is going to add 4 days to that and say it should arrive roughly around June 10th. Okay. Now, second line on here is trying to show the scheduled quantity of 5. It's released, so it's basically the same as above. And on June 20th is when it's scheduled to ship. Okay, that's the basic old report. The other report does kind of the same thing. This is the one we're moving to a little bit at a time. It looks pretty much the same. I'm up on screen here. The only difference is we took and just made one line or each shipment its own line. This works better if you print it to Excel. It's really the main reason for it, because we have a lot of folks still going to Excel for other reasons. But it cleaned up that scenario. Looks pretty much the same. If you notice, the first line has where the order quantity is and the whole balance shows. The rest of it's just a star to say, hey, look for the other line with the same fixture type. Everything else is identical. And more on this in the future, but we can handle multiple addresses better. Actually, right now that's helping with resales, but it's going to help with regular orders as well, or commissioned orders. Okay. All right, that's great. Everything shipped as we thought of, but that's not the way some of this stuff works. In other words, if you order a pole and they ship bolts ahead on the same catalog number, you have a problem. Or any other scenario when you order one thing and they ship it different times for whatever the reasons are there. Okay, so what I'll do, and this allows me to identify a few other items. There's this SEL item box here. And I can use that to select lines. So I'll do that by selecting all shipment lines. It basically click both those boxes for me because, well, some of this gets long sometimes. And then I can right click and I can actually remove shipping lines. Okay. If you've used Oasis long enough, you know you cannot remove an order line. That's on purpose. That's because we have shipping, invoicing, and all this other stuff attached to that order line. If you go and delete it, we have all kinds of chaos in the database. So let's go ahead and add this in again, but I'm going to begin by saying this is a poll and they ship the bolts. The poll is going to ship at the end of the month. Okay. Have dates on the whole bit. I just have to put it in the system. So how I reflect that in this scenario is I'm going to add a factory item. Okay. When I add a factory item, it basically gives me 2 extra lines below. And these are not order lines. These are factory items. The way you tell that is the order line is always a grade in the background, which indicates you cannot change it. And then the factory lines basically are open text. You can change those whenever you want, however you want, because they're not what we're pivoting the rest of the system account again. So again, the invoicing side and everything else we talked about before doesn't look at these lines. Okay. So we have 10 items. That looks good. And by the way, if I think of this as 10 sets of bolts or something like that, then I can go through and I can put in a net price if I want to go through that detail. So it does allow me to set it for invoicing, but that's a different conversation I do not want to have today. But the main thing is identify that this is the bolts associated with that line. And I'm going to add my shipping. Let's say all 10 sets of bolts. So it's 4, 6, 8, whatever it is. They have to bolt that sucker to the ground, so to speak, or concrete. And what's their sales order number? Put in. Okay, the date that they shipped, let's say they just shipped. So they shipped today. Okay, and it shipped out of, I don't know what I have in here. Yeah, I guess Cabot. Yes. Same thing as before. Again, because I didn't set up my my warehouses in my manufacturer I'm shipping at or from. I'll have to manually put this in or just leave it 0. That's fine too. It just won't give a date in that case. Okay. And at that point, that's done. Now I have to identify the shipping associated with the less anchor bolts. So maybe you have an LAB or something like that. It says less anchor bolts on the actual pole. Add shipping. It's not an actual. We'll have it change here in a second, but it's scheduled to ship at the end of the month. There you go. Main thing I want to show here is the basic mechanics of putting in shipping on a simple line, or in this case, we have a pole that ship bolts ahead, and then the pole is going to ship later this month, obviously without the anchor bolts because you already have them. Okay. Again, if you have questions, send those over to Hayden in the chat. We'll get to them, or he'll scream at me as they come in. And now we're going to go to the more interesting stuff. So obviously, this would work great if we had one order at a time. That's not the way this works. Putting this together in a process is what I want to hint at. So just putting in the basics here, trying to get the shipping information is very important. But now we want to go through and come up with a routine for the morning. So first things first, if you happen to have factories, and there's several of them we do this with now, that download shipping status information automatically, then what you'll need to do is a couple of small things in the morning. Well, just one thing in the morning, in addition to what I'll show you here in a second. That first step is you go to orders, you go to tools, and then you show the order download folder here. Okay. And what you'll see in here, and something's wrong with my screen. Okay, there it is. long story, I broke something. But the main thing is in here, I have all the orders that the system could not automatically pull into my database for whatever the reason is. Okay. So it came down, I might have an EDI order that I don't have the order in Oasis. It's going to appear here. If I have an added territory spec that I'm getting credit on, so maybe I have the architect and I'm working, or the rep somewhere else across the country is placing the order, then it'll come in here. And again, I don't have the order and I'll have to basically manually pull it into my system because there's nothing for it to match to. Okay. So you have to work through all these or any other issues. And again, you're going to know your data and your customers better. And you literally have to double click on this, open it up, take a look at it, process it, and shut it back down. But the way you go about this is once you evaluate it, and I'm not going to open these because it doesn't matter what's in here. The main thing is I can go through and say, what in here, I'll do file. I'm sorry. Actually, there's menus up here, and unfortunately they're not showing. So what I'll do is I'll do a create matching Oasis transaction. Okay. And that will happen if I need to pull in an EDI order or something similar to that. So sorry, I messed my system up earlier today and I forgot to fix it. So when I do a create matching Oasis transaction, I'll take potentially that EDI order or the spec order, basically copy the data into Oasis and pop up a screen for you to make any last minute edits before closing. So there's a lot of other tricks in there. So, all right. Main thing is if you have a factory that does downloads, that's usually step one in the morning, just to make sure all those are processed. Step two, inside of Oasis forever, we have unacknowledged orders, unscheduled orders, unshipped orders, and missed shipping dates. We'll go through those. I'm going to skip schedule date calendar for right now. Long story on that one. It's a neat tool for those that need it. Contact me if you're interested. Unacknowledged. So I don't like this one personally, but basically it's all the orders that haven't been acknowledged that are a couple of days or older. Realistically, most people aren't interested in whether the order has been acknowledged by the factory or not. But if you happen to have a factory that you really have to stay on top of because it seems like they don't get the order or there's always issues with them getting the order, it makes some sense. This has become less of an issue, but the problem we had in the past is the fax machine sometimes wouldn't push stuff over 15 years ago. So we come up with this list here, and that simply means we don't know what the order number is from the factory, or we haven't put in the shipment one, and it's a nice list. Okay. So all I've done is click on that. Where most people begin their process after they check for any factory downloads is they'll click on the unscheduled list. Now, this is where I usually begin, and there are some tricks in here. First of all, I say show my orders only. That's nice if I'm working my orders and the person next to me is working their orders. But if you leave this unchecked, you'll see all scheduled orders. And what this is this is all the orders that are at least 2 days old. And again, this is a default, and there's a configuration setting. We can change the default. I'll let you get with support if you want to change this. But if you put an order in today, it won't be on this list. You look again tomorrow, it won't be on this list. In 2 days, when you click on unscheduled, that order you put in will be on this list if it does not have any shipping information on it. The reason why we did that is we figure it takes a couple of days for the factory to get the order coded inside their system and scheduled. Okay. May take longer, but we want to give them a couple of days before we start screaming at them. So on this list, what I normally want to see people do is they'll walk down through this list, popping one order at a time to resolve each one of the shipping issues. So I won't do that today, but all it is you just double click on it. This, by the way, happens to be a resale, which is nice. I'll go ahead and show that. If I double click on it, I say show items over here. I only see that order, which is nice, inside the resale order. So for those of you that do this, know that on a given resale, you may have 4 or 5 brands or just one brand. You just don't know. So I double clicked on that one order. I see just the lines on that order. And just to show that resale orders shouldn't be anything to worry about, they work just like regular commissioned orders, is let's say I want to basically identify that everything on this order is shipped, because I've been told that maybe on a website or through an email. And what I'll do is I'll do this selection thing. So jumping ahead here a little bit, I'll select some order lines. Let's put in a little X thing. It basically just check those boxes. You can do it however you want. And as soon as I do that, I'll show you another trick. I can go up to this little shipping toolbar. If you don't see it, you can say edit shipping toolbar. It toggles it on or off. And in here, I can put in whatever I need to put in as far as the shipping information that I got from the factory. If we now go ahead and do something like that, I'll click a date. let's say it's shipped today. Location, I'll put in, yes, carrier code, UPS. And as soon as I hit apply, it copies that information down to each one of those lines. So that's one way to mass enter inside of an order that you have. Okay. You hit save and close. And notice we have these orders here. So the 1281 is on my screen. And again, if I refresh it by clicking unscheduled, 1281 is gone. So it met the need to have shipping information on each line of that order, which, by the way, if I didn't have shipping information on a line, on that last line, it would have stayed on this list, because it wants to know line by line whether that order has been scheduled in this case, because I'm working in a scheduled list. So, all right, there's the basics so far. Next step, I click on unshipped. Now, the thought process here is I'm starting to get from being just manual, boring, waiting for my coffee to get done, click through data entry stuff. Now I better have my coffee in place, because things might get exciting here. What's happening is I click on unshipped, and I've told the system that these orders should have shipped in the past. So the date, the scheduled date is either today or prior. So I might have to call a customer and interact with them on what to happen. Hopefully after I got the factory on the phone and figured out what they're actually going to do to fix, well, it could be a problem. So let's pick this first one, this commissioned order here. I'll double click on it. It'll pull this up, and let's take a look at the lines here. Now, if you happen to use estimated date, again, it's not a bad thing. I have some folks that'll do that. It will pull into this same process here. In other words, if it thinks it's unshipped, basically we calculated that on average it ships so many days after the release date. If you notice, PAT ACD is kind of in the neighborhood too, because that's automatic. That one I had to figure out myself. Key element here is, this is a good way to catch factories that don't give you shipping information promptly, okay, before you laugh at all of them. But main thing is there are certain groups that seem to be a little more issues than others. But it found all this information off of this. Normally it's a schedule line, and you look at that schedule line and you'll see that it is in the past as well. Regardless, because this is on the unshipped list, you probably need to begin by assessing, do I need to call the factory and see what's going on? Do I already know what's going on? Maybe it's the next email in my email. But the main thing is, I may have an issue with the customer at this point, because the expectation from them is it should have already shipped. And that's the way you probably should approach these orders. May not be that big an issue, but this is where the issues begin. Okay. I'll do the same thing I did before, but I'm going to show you another trick too. By the way, there's shipment tracking over here. And what I can do is I can quickly update any of these items real quick. So I can go through and say, hey, I want to schedule everything. It's got redated again. And what we have is I'll just put in my zeros like I did a second ago. Warehouse is good. And let's say it's they redated it out to the 27th. Ignore the invoices because they probably did ship. Actually, let's go through that scenario here. Let's say these actually did ship. I have the tracking info. So we'll do a ship on those lines. And it wants to know again, what's the details here. Looks good. And let's say it shipped, let's ship today. That's fine. And carrier, stick it UPS for DRINs. Hit OK. And just like that, what it did is it created a line underneath each one of those order lines that I selected, creating the shipping line. Okay. And putting the information I put in there. By the way, I can overwrite one. Let's say this one shipped on 9/9. This is the one odd duck in there. Now, let me go ahead and select the rest of the lines. Those two, and by the way, I can do that by fixture type. That's what I like about it. We do box those lines, by the way, if you haven't noticed. That kind of helps follow across your long, big screens nowadays. To identify, oh yeah, that is fixture type B. I got that one selected. Fixture type C, I got that one selected. That looks good. So now I can go ahead and schedule those to ship. Let's say at the end of the month. Okay, we just scheduled the whole order. It's done. Now, another trick here, by the way. Notice we have the shipping information here, or percent invoice and percent shipped. Let me look that order up by hand here, show it to you, because if I click right now, if I clicked on shipped, it's going to be off my list. So I want to look up the order real fast. So see, 20230404 and A. Okay, there it is. Now notice the ship. Hey, 88% ship. Uh-oh, missed a line somewhere. 28. Oh, because those are scheduled. Sorry. I was in a mild panic that I missed something. Main thing is we've moved away from the statuses controlling a lot of this, and I'd like to invite everyone to think about this for a second. I almost prefer nowadays that the status really be controlled by the accounting group, because once they close it, it pulls it off all the lists. Because hey, if you got paid for it, why are you spending more time on it? And that usually means customer's happy, they paid the bill, and it comes back to you. Bite my tongue. I know there are scenarios out there that are different, but main thing is it's hard to identify what this is. Did one item ship or all the items shipped? If I try to place the status to shipped, again on invoice, did one item invoice or did the entire thing invoice? Don't know. So we come up with this years ago. It's just simply file preferences, add the percent invoice and percent shipped. Now I know, hey, this is mostly shipped. It's 88% shipped. And that it's easier information to manage, I think, in that scenario. Okay. Basically, I'm trying to show some tricks through here off the list too. All right, so unshipped. Now, Cameron, any questions? Because now I'm going to do one complex concept. Some people may not care.
No questions so far.
Perfect. All right. So if you happen to have questions, pop them to Cameron. I'm going to show you an advanced concept. Okay. So the advanced concepts here, you can do or not. In other words, there's scenarios that do pop up, and they do pop up frequently. You're probably experiencing these, but it allows you to use the system to tell you things you may not know. So let's say we went through this. We're doing this process every day. In other words, we're going in, taking a look at our show order download folder, processing those orders. We're going to unscheduled. I usually skip on unacknowledged. I don't believe in it, but anyway, that's me. But I go through the unscheduled list. I process all these. I go through the unshipped list. I process all these. And then maybe once a week, or maybe more than that, it kind of depends upon the group I talk to, actually. You can click on missed shipping dates. Okay, so here's what's going on here. This is a little different. What ends up happening inside of Oasis, I didn't make a big deal of this earlier, but what happens is, based upon your estimated date or the date you put in first, okay? So whichever is first, if you have an estimated date or if you put in a date here, then Oasis will lock in what is called a target date, okay? The thought process is the following. If we basically ship this or schedule this within 1 or 2 days of that target date, we're okay. But what happens in some cases is we'll go through, especially the schedules. Let's just focus on that. If the factory gives you one date out here, let's say they gave us the 5/28 date and I put it in, and then they redate it for 6/6. Okay. Well, the first date they gave me was 5/28. What if I had sent that on a shipping report to a customer, and now go back in and tell the system, oh, it's 6/6, or automatically it downloaded from my factory originally 5/28. I printed a shipping report or customer portal or something like that, and the customer is expecting 5/28. And then the system automatically updates, or I manually key in 6/6. I have an issue. In other words, I have a customer who says, wait a minute, what's going on here? I was expecting 5/28 and I have 6/6. So the missed target dates allows you to go back in and identify the orders where you may have an issue with a customer, or a customer may have an issue, period, that you need to somehow rectify. And it just gives you the visibility on this. It allows you to go through and say, hey, I want to correct this problem. Maybe this is a big project out here, especially on this line that hadn't shipped here. So I need to go to the factory and find out, are you guys seriously going to ship it this time or not? Because the customer's they're trying to do a grand opening at this big museum that has national attention. We need to get this thing shipped, or it'll look really bad on the opening day. So that it gives you ammunition, and actually first it gives you information so you know you have a problem brewing, and then you can go and figure out how to correct it. Okay. Main thing is, if it's not an issue here, what you can do is do what we call accepting the target dates. And it's over here on the right side. You click accept targets. And what it'll do is it'll basically make the current dates, whether they're scheduled dates or whatever, match the target date, okay, and save and close. Now it's off my list. So that's the LFI 2023. Click miss ship dates, it's gone now. Like I said, that's a fairly complex concept and does happen to a lot of our customers. In other words, we never thought of this. This is something the customer brought to us, and we're finding more and more folks use that because my example right there is very real. In other words, the big grand opening of something that's literally going to be on national news, and they can't get a product shipped. Guess what? This makes you aware of the problem before the customer calls up mad. So you're able to give more value to the customer and actually help them with some of their problems. And again, by the way, customer is the poor contractor sitting out there trying to figure out what's going on, not necessarily the distributor. All right, let me check my list of stuff so far. Cameron, any questions? Sure, I'm not listening.
No questions so far.
Perfect. All right, so we've been through this. We went through the mechanics, so estimated date, acknowledged it. Okay, we've done bulk ads, shipping toolbar. I've done various tips and tricks in there as well. Splitting the line is good. I did go through the morning process, the download folder, the unshipped orders and unscheduled. Notice I don't have unacknowledged. You're good on that. And by the way, I do not have the missed target dates because that is an advanced concept. Well, I guess I do have it right here. Sorry, I forgot to put that in there. It's a nice thing as well. Now, let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about reports, okay? There are some basic reports that I think everyone needs to know about when it comes to shipping inside of Oasis. The first one under reports is what I'll call the managed shipping performance report. So sorry, not that one. Do that again. First one I think is the shipping date request report. I'll come back to the managed date report here in a second. So the shipping date request report is another one we created a long time ago. The key here is if you have a factory that's starting to fall behind, maybe they're having supplier issues, maybe they're having whatever issues out there. But the main thing is you need to get information from them and you need to build a way that is easier for them to go get the information. In other words, you want to help them a little bit because they're probably getting a lot of other folks yelling at them as well. That's where this report comes from. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and move this down to, well, I'll just keep it wide open, I guess. We'll go for the unscheduled items. So let's say we're just not getting schedules out of this factory at all because they're getting backed up. It's a data entry type thing. So what I'll do is I'll click unscheduled. I'll leave it wide open, but you can actually lock that into a given factory. Okay. And you can do it by project and a few other things as well, especially if you're trying to stay focused on a project there. But the key is I'll leave this one wide open, and these do not have schedules, and I need to get a schedule out of them. By the way, you can do manufacture down here as well. I forgot about that. And what I'll do is I'll just print it. The way this works is actually fairly simple. It may seem like a lot when you look at it the first time. What we're trying to do is give the factory, in this case, as much information as we can. You can argue we may have compressed this too much, but the main thing is we give the order number. That should give them something to work with to get into the system. And because they haven't scheduled it yet, guess what? They don't have a sales order number on this as well. But if they have already given us a schedule, or if they have already acknowledged it, at least we have that to show back to them. Okay. Next thing we have is the quantity, the fixture type, if I'd actually put it on this order, the item, when it was released, that's back in May. I better get something on this real quick. And it is not scheduled. In other words, we haven't seen anything on this yet. By the way, if this is a 30-line order and everything else is shipped, we don't care about the shipped items. We care about this one item we need a schedule on. Trying to keep them focused so we're not beating them up with a lot of information that will simply make their job more complicated. So anyway, this is the report. I can get that down to one factory, get them to give me that information back so I can put it into Oasis, or at least see what my issues are so I can go manage those with my customers. Okay. And again, you can do pretty much the same thing as what we have over here, unscheduled, unshipped, and even missed targets. But I'll go back in here real quick and I'll have to do a little bit of hand waving, so to speak, on this today anyway. And I'll do a shipping date request. The other thing that's nice on this is I can go through and say, hey, show me everything that's been rescheduled 3 or more times. So if I have a factory that keeps redating stuff, maybe this would be a good report. I can have one of the owners bring over to the factory when they're getting mad at us, say, hey, look, we're having issues because, you know, it takes forever to get information out of you on when something's going to ship. Anyway, that's a nice report for that. Okay. The other thing that is nice as well is I can actually do an unscheduled or unshipped report based on a date. So if next week I need to have everything on site for something, I can actually plug that date in here. And it's kind of hand waving on this one. So let's say I need everything shipped by the 15th, or we're going to have issues. Everything needs to be on site by the following week. Okay. So I'll do an unshipped by then, and it just does the same thing as if you ran the report or clicked on this link when it was on, on the 15th, but obviously today is the 6th. So it just does the calculations in the future. So what's going to be the issue there? Okay. All right. Any questions so far, Cameron?
Nothing in the chat. No questions.
Good. Either I'm doing really good or everyone's asleep. Sorry. Probably the sleep part. All right, let's go to managing shipping report, shipping performance here. So this one's another one that's good for management. Okay. And there's several ways to do this. I'll simply show you this because most people don't really get into it too much until they, we want to come back, and then we can go through the, the support process on this to give you more details. Normally, you'll lock in a time frame as well. So you might want last year to today, but again, this is a test database. Lord knows what's in here. But what I'll do is I'll hit update. The key here is it's going to give you a bunch of statistics. And the first time you look at this, I don't know, my eyes glaze over is what's going on really. But what's happening here is I have a count of lines on orders. So this isn't 4 orders, that's the 4 lines on orders. There were project orders, 3 lines on orders that were stock orders and so forth, all the way down, okay? When I get to min and max, that's the number of days. So the key element here is when you're working inside of Oasis, it tracks the date of release. In other words, when you send that over to the factory, it knows you released it. If you sent them a hold order or put it back on hold, obviously it clears that out. But it knows when it started. You put in the date or download from the factory the data that shipped. Simple. I take the date it shipped minus the number, the date that I released it, that gives me a number of days. Then we do some statistics here, and this again becomes good for management or just trying to work with customers setting expectations. The average days to ship for this little test manufacturer I have here is 9 days, 36 if it's a stock order. Seems backwards, but I've actually seen that in production too. But main thing is it gives you a number, says, hey, a project order is going to be 9 days, a stock order is 36. I guess don't do stock orders with them. And on down. So this is the average days to ship from the release date. Okay. Then if you're a math person, you talk about standard deviation, some of this other stuff. I'd love to talk about that stuff, but I will skip that for today. The key thing here is, if you notice over to the right, and I'll go ahead and give this a little advanced tip here. That is, it's suggesting that you set 9 days as being the setting inside the manufacturer. Okay, so I showed that a second ago. There's the manufacturer setting. I'll go there in a second. And I can set that up in such a way that it will add 9 days from the day I release to that estimated date. Okay, so that'd be my internal estimate on when it's going to ship. So they don't even have to tell me. I'm going to start watching that order more in 9 days than I would today, even if they don't give me shipping information. So it really allows me to clarify things a little bit. And again, I do have some groups that will send that out as being their agency estimate is when it might ship. But again, that's I understand the issues around that. So some people don't like doing that. Okay. All right, that's the bulk of that. If I hit save, by the way, any of my settings I set up here will actually track back to the terms. By the way, nothing magical I did there. I just didn't close it earlier. But under freight and shipping, it adds it into these entries over here. So my project project stock and the found other orders, I could set those over here as well. Okay. There's some manufacturer shipping program stuff we can do as well. I don't want to go over that today because that takes a little bit longer to kind of go over. But if you're interested in getting into creating your own estimates when something is going to ship, let me know, and we can go from there. All right. Now let me go back, see where I am on the list. So went through shipping reports, shipping request reports, shipping statistics. We went through that pretty much. All right. The portal, I forgot to set that up today. I'm going to have to skip it. The main thing is if you have O4, there's a customer web portal. Basically allows your customer to get on the web. They can actually look at their orders, not under everybody else's orders. They do not see money. They only see shipping information. And they can see anything you'd print on a report there at any time. And there's a lot of other details around that. Main thing is it works. It's been around for a while, and we're going to enhance it a bunch with some other stuff later in the year, starting next year, for a major update on that. So more on that as we go. I want to touch on Pat one more time, because just by putting the information in, we want to start with the main goal here, and that is we want to basically be able to cover as much as we can to make our, basically, if you're already doing a spreadsheet, you see the value, and I'm not trying to sell you on anything, on doing something you already have actually. But the main thing is the spreadsheet and all the variations we have inside of Oasis. Pretty much everybody, I think I have one person out there who's debating me still, but the main thing is it gives you the capability of doing everything you need as far as tracking that order and making sure that it ships to make your customer happy. And so if you're doing the spreadsheet, it's just how is the question. But if you don't do this already, or haven't really been interested in the past, just simply identifying the fact that the factory got the order in some cases is huge. But being able to work with the customer and identify, hey, here are the shipping issues, and here's when things are going to ship, that's huge as well. And again, if you want to talk that through a little bit more, let us know. Now, the secondary stuff we talked about, last item on Pat, because this is starting to get a little bit of traction with some folks. Let me go back to my orders for a second. And what I'll do is I'm going to create a new order just for argument's sake. And I'm going to pick a factory, customer. And it doesn't matter what that is. What I'll do is I'll put in a quantity of 10. Type code doesn't matter, but I'll put in something, and I don't know what I have in here. Yeah, I think that, yeah, that's one I use a little bit. Now, simply by placing that in, first of all, my pricing is out of date, which is kind of nice. But what I want to show is Pat ACD. And the reason why I wanted to show you that is the system is calculating based on statistics and machine learning what happened in the past, trying to identify that particular catalog number with what it's seen should ship on the 12th. So it's the 6th of the day. If you have somebody who's like, I got to get this week, obviously it's not going to happen. Then you get this next week, probably the shipping is still not going to happen, probably for about 3 weeks to actually arrive on site. So key element here is simply by putting in shipping information, the system does start calculating shipping information for you, which is really cool. Oh, by the way, that's nice for a stock order. Let's just get rid of that. Let me minimize it in case somebody has a question. Let me go home. I noticed earlier I had a LFI project from earlier. I'll do the same thing. Notice I'll do a 11 RV SBK. Okay, now it looks like it's an average. Again, this is a test database. There's not too much in it, but what'll happen inside the system is based upon the PAT lead time. So the only difference between a PAT ACD is an agency calculated date versus a PAT lead time, which again is just trying to say, hey, how many weeks out, if I were to order off this project, would it actually ship? And what it's trying to tell you here is anytime it says average, it's saying, hey, I'm using a strong average on this, or just that's all I can do. So it didn't identify this particular series number 111. Okay, so it's literally tracking the background series and a whole bunch of other stuff, customers, time of year, and Lord knows what else. Just trying to identify any variations with the factories or variations within their products. And it'll start giving more specific dates on there. So say 2 weeks. So if it says 2 weeks, that means within that product range, it's pretty common for it to ship within 2 weeks. But it says average in there, like average following week or average 2 weeks. It's just doing an average across everything it's seen for that factory. So key element here is we can actually probably do better than what you're guessing already with Pat. But now, because we're using numbers behind it, but now you don't even have to think about it or anything like that. In other words, it's I wouldn't say let me back up. I would still think about it because it's important to cross-check the computer. But the key is a lot of people know this anecdotally. Is like, hey, that particular product ships in 3 weeks when the factory says 2 weeks. Well, the system figures that out for you and gives you a little bit of numbers mathematically behind the scene and say, hey, yeah, you're probably right. It's going to take 3 weeks for that, and the factory's all wet. So. Cool. All right. That is, let me double check here. I think I'm at the end. That is it. I have covered the content for this month. If you have any questions or think of any of them, well, let me ask a question. Cameron, any questions?
No new questions in the chat.
Sweet. I either did really good or really poorly, and I apologize if it's poor. If you can't think of any questions after the fact, please email support@oasissalessoftware.com. And next month, we will be going over more of the reporting side of all this. Stay tuned. I believe that is, double check or I'll lie to you. Yeah, July 11th. So it'll be a week after, second week of July. So, all right. I do appreciate your time. And let us know what we need to do for you. Talk to you later.